All right, so are you ready to dive into something pretty unique today? It's a YouTube video that blends dream interpretation with biblical prophecy.
Oh, wow. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, right. It's one of those things where you stumble across content and you're just like, wait a minute, hold on, there's something deeper here.
I know exactly what you mean.
And that's exactly how I felt with this video. The creator, her name's Tori B., she believes her dream wasn't just, a random thing, just a random nighttime story.
Uh-huh.
It was a symbolic message about what's happening in society, even in the spiritual realm.
Hmm.
She even brings up the New World Order, which we all know is a pretty loaded term.
It is, yeah, definitely often gets tied to conspiracy theories about, well, about pretty much everything.
Right, like everything.
But for now, let's just put those aside and focus on, like, the heart of it all here, the dream itself.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. Let's focus on the dream. And it's a pretty vivid one, maybe a little disturbing, to be honest.
Okay.
It starts with this massive, devastating world event. There's chaos, uncertainty.
Yeah.
And she describes it as having a purge-like atmosphere.
Okay.
Like that movie where all crime is legal for a night.
Yeah, I see where she's going with that imagery for sure. That sense of lawlessness and unchecked behavior.
Yep.
It definitely sets a certain tone.
Totally. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The dreamer's brother, who she says his name translates to red hair, and his girlfriend have just had a baby.
Okay.
You'd think there'd be joy, right?
Right.
But instead, the girlfriend decides to join this purge
What?
and starts planning some truly awful things.
Oh, wow. Like what kind of things? The choice to participate is disturbing enough, but yeah, I imagine the specifics add another layer to this.
Absolutely. Tori specifically mentions her planning to kill children,
Oh, my.
justifying it as some warped way of protecting her own home and family.
Wow.
It's clearly a moment in the dream that really shook her, and it's no wonder why.
It is. It's a chilling image.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about the underlying anxieties and fears it might represent,
Yeah.
both for the dreamer and on a broader societal level.
Yeah. It's definitely heavy stuff. And this is where the video takes a turn toward biblical interpretation.
Okay.
Tori connects the brother in the dream to Esau, the biblical figure, who, as you know, made that infamous trade of his birthright for a bowl of soup.
Ah, yes. The classic tale of short-sightedness, prioritizing immediate gratification over something far more valuable.
Right. And the video suggests that this symbolizes a larger trend of people neglecting important things, like their spiritual inheritance for the sake of instant gratification and worldly pursuits. It's almost like those participating in the purge are choosing the bowl of soup over their birthright, if you will.
That's a powerful analogy. It brings up questions about what we truly value and the potential consequences of those choices, both individually and collectively.
Exactly. And this leads us to another biblical connection. Tori uses James 1.14-15 to explain the giving birth part of the dream.
Okay.
Those verses talk about temptation leading to desire, and desire, when it takes root, giving birth to sin.
Sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death, the passage concludes. It paints a very stark picture of the downward spiral that unchecked desires can lead to.
It really does.
Yeah.
And when you apply that to the dream's context, it makes you wonder, are those participating in this purge giving birth to sin and ultimately paving the way for their own destruction? It's a question the video leaves open, but it certainly gets you thinking.
Yeah, I'm struck by how the video uses this word purge on multiple levels. It's a personal choice, a violent event in the dream, but also perhaps symbolic of something larger, maybe even a societal or spiritual cleansing.
That's such a good point. It's almost like the word itself becomes a symbol with different layers of meaning, inviting us to consider what needs purging in our own lives and in the world around us.
And to explore what that purging might look like and what consequences, intended or unintended it might bring.
Now, to support this idea of a larger purge,
Yeah.
Tori brings in Ezekiel 20.38.
Okay.
It talks about God purging those who rebel against him, preventing them from entering the promised land.
That verse definitely adds a layer of complexity. It suggests that even amidst destruction and chaos, there might be a divine hand at work separating the faithful from those who have strayed.
Right. But it also raises some tough questions. If this purge is part of God's plan, does that mean those participating are simply fulfilling their predetermined roles? What does that say about free will and personal responsibility? It's a lot to unpack, and I think it's something worth exploring further.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the age-old struggle of trying to reconcile faith with the often harsh realities of the world.
Okay, so we've got this world in chaos.
Right.
A purge happening and biblical figures popping up in the dream.
Yeah.
But then things get even more intense when an intruder tries to break into the dreamer's home.
Ah, the home. Classic dream symbolism.
Yeah.
It often represents the self, the inner sanctuary. And the intruder, well, that could be anything that threatens that sense of security.
And get this, the intruder's trying to remove screws from the door with a drill. It's a very specific and unsettling image. But the dreamer fights back, reversing the drill's action, and even managing to stab the intruder's hands through a hole in the door.
Wow, that's some powerful imagery. It sounds like a visceral representation of defending one's personal boundaries. What does Tori make of it?
She leans heavily into the idea of spiritual warfare.
Hmm.
The intruder represents evil forces, temptation, maybe even negative thoughts or emotions, and the dreamer fighting back symbolizes using prayer and faith as weapons against those forces.
It's interesting how the dream blends the physical act of self-defense with this idea of spiritual struggle. It suggests that both are necessary, that protecting our inner world requires as much vigilance and strength as protecting our physical space.
That's a great point. It's like she's saying that we need to be prepared on all fronts, both in the physical and the spiritual realms.
And that sometimes the fight is not just against external forces, but also against our own inner demons.
Exactly. Now, to support this interpretation of spiritual warfare, Tori points to a couple of Bible verses. First, there's Matthew 16:20, where Jesus tells his disciples not to reveal his identity as the Messiah.
That seems a bit indirect. How does she connect that to the dream?
She sees it as symbolic of the reversal. Things not going according to the intruder's plan, like how Jesus' true nature wasn't revealed when expected. It's about unexpected outcomes, I think.
I see the thread she's trying to pull, although it's definitely a more symbolic interpretation.
Is
What's the other verse?
Matthew 24:43. It's the one about the homeowner who would have stayed awake and guarded his house if he knew when the thief was coming.
That's a more direct connection to the dream. It emphasizes the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and resisting temptation, both literal and figurative.
Right. It's like a reminder to be alert, spiritually speaking,
Yeah.
and not let those negative forces catch us off guard.
So the message seems to be ready, be aware, and fortify your defenses, both internal and external.
And now we get to what I think is one of the most fascinating parts of this whole interpretation, the symbolism of doors.
Yes. We briefly touched on this earlier, the idea that doors can represent choices, opportunities, even people and places in our lives. I'm curious to see how Tori develops that idea.
Well, remember how the dreamer rearranged the door after the intruder was gone?
Yeah.
She made it more secure, harder to break into?
Yes, a clear sign of learning from the experience and taking steps to prevent future intrusions.
Right. Well, Tori suggests this symbolizes something deeper. It's about learning from our challenges, making wiser choices, and essentially closing off those doors that lead to negative influences.
It makes you think about the boundaries we set in our lives, the relationships we cultivate, and the environments we choose to be in. Are we allowing access to things that ultimately harm us, or are we consciously creating a space for growth and well-being?
You got it. And then she takes it a step further and talks about how God can open new and better doors for us as we grow and evolve.
The idea of divine guidance and opportunity. It suggests that even when we close doors to protect ourselves, there's always the potential for something better to come along. Totally. And to support this idea, she brings in a couple of Bible verses specifically about doors.
Okay.
One of them is John 10:9, where Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture.
Now, that's a powerful metaphor. It suggests that Jesus himself is the gateway to salvation, to a richer, more fulfilling life.
Right. And it ties in perfectly with this whole idea of closing off those negative doors and opening ourselves up to the abundance and guidance that God offers.
It suggests that sometimes closing a door isn't about shutting ourselves off from the world, but about choosing a different path, one that leads to greater spiritual nourishment.
And that leads us to another interesting verse, Isaiah 26:26. It says, Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath has passed by.
This one seems to have a different tone. It's less about seeking opportunity and more about finding refuge, seeking protection from a looming threat. Exactly. And I think it could also be interpreted as a call to inward reflection, to focusing on our own spiritual growth and connection with God, especially during challenging times.
It suggests that sometimes closing a door isn't just about keeping something out, but about creating a safe space for inner peace and spiritual renewal.
I love that. It's like building a fortress for our soul, a place where we can connect with something greater than ourselves and find strength to weather the storms.
This whole idea of doors is really resonating with me. It's such a versatile metaphor, and it makes you think about all of the different ways we can open and close ourselves off to experiences, relationships, and even our own inner world.
It's definitely a lot to ponder. And it brings us to the final scene of the dream, where the dreamer finds herself on a balcony securing the windows and either hears or says the question, "Are you afraid?"
A balcony, interesting choice of setting. It offers a different perspective, a higher vantage point. I wonder what significance that holds.
And you won't believe what Bible verse Tori connects this to Psalm 53.2, which talks about God looking down from heaven, searching for those who are wise and seek him.
That is surprising. It's almost as if the dreamer on this balcony is assuming a godlike perspective, surveying the world below. Or maybe it's a moment of questioning, wondering if she herself is being observed.
Right. It's such a layered image, and it makes you think about whose perspective we're adopting when we look at the world. Are we seeing things from a place of fear or from a place of faith and understanding?
That's a powerful question to consider, especially in the context of this dream with its themes of chaos, judgment, and spiritual warfare.
And that, my friend, is just the first part of this wild ride.
I'm hooked. Where does it go from here? This dream interpretation is already so layered and thought-provoking.
Well, buckle up, because in the next part, we'll delve even deeper into Tori's interpretation, exploring more biblical connections and unpacking what this all might mean for us in our own lives.
So we've got this dream filled with some pretty heavy symbolism, a world in chaos, a purge, a brother representing Esau, and an intruder trying to break in. Plus that unsettling question, are you afraid? Lingering in the air.
It's a lot to take in, right? And it's all being interpreted through this lens of biblical prophecy and spiritual warfare. It's like Tori sees her dream as a glimpse into what's happening in the world, or maybe even what's to come.
I can definitely see that. It's not uncommon for people to look for meaning and guidance in dreams, especially when the world feels uncertain or even frightening.
Totally. And here's something that really caught my attention. Tori connects this whole purge concept back to the story of Esau and Jacob, those biblical twins, with, shall we say, a complicated relationship.
Ah, yes, the classic tale of sibling rivalry and a stolen birthright. But how does she tie that back to the dream?
Well, she emphasizes that Esau wasn't just any brother. He was the firstborn son, the one destined for inheritance and leadership within the family.
Mm.
And yet he willingly traded all that away for a simple meal.
A decision he presumably came to regret, right? It highlights the danger of short-sighted choices and undervaluing what truly matters.
Exactly. And Tori's interpretation suggests that this is happening on a larger scale today. People are choosing fleeting pleasures and worldly pursuits over their spiritual connection with God. It's like they're trading their birthright for a bowl of soup, metaphorically speaking.
So in essence, she's saying that this purge could be seen as a consequence of this spiritual neglect, a sort of cosmic correction or wake-up call.
That's the gist of it.
Yeah.
And she even goes so far as to suggest that those participating in the purge, those causing chaos and destruction, might actually be unknowingly fulfilling God's will.
Now, that's a provocative interpretation. It definitely raises questions about free will versus divine plan, the role of individual choice amidst larger forces at play.
It certainly does. It makes you wonder if this purge is part of a larger spiritual battle. Where do we stand as individuals? Are we caught in the crossfire, or do we have agency in shaping the outcome?
Big questions indeed. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is just one interpretation. There are many different perspectives within theology and spirituality on these very topics.
Absolutely. And it's not our place to say which interpretation is right or wrong. But what I find so valuable about Tori's approach is that it encourages us to think deeply, to grapple with these complex ideas, and maybe even examine our own beliefs and choices.
That's the beauty of deep dives like this. They challenge us to engage with different perspectives, to expand our understanding, and to ultimately form our own conclusions.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one more element that really stuck with me, the emphasis Tori places on God's presence and protection, even amidst the chaos and darkness.
Yes, that stood out to me as well, especially in the context of a dream that's, let's be honest, pretty unsettling and even apocalyptic at times.
For sure. But remember the scene where the dreamer is on the balcony? And here's the question, are you afraid?
I do. It felt like a pivotal moment, a confrontation with vulnerability, and perhaps a recognition of the larger forces at work.
Well, Tori connects this back to Psalm 53, where it describes God looking down from heaven and seeing the wickedness of humanity. But even amidst that wickedness, there's this sense that he's still searching for those who seek him, those who are trying to live righteously.
It's a powerful reminder that even when the world feels like it's falling apart, we're not alone. There's a higher power watching over us, offering guidance and protection.
And Tori takes it a step further, saying that just as God is watching over us, he's also within us guiding and strengthening those who have faith.
It's a beautiful and comforting thought. It suggests that true strength comes not from external forces, but from cultivating that inner connection with the divine.
Exactly. It's about finding that source of peace and resilience within ourselves, even when the world around us feels turbulent and uncertain.
So what can we, the listeners, take away from this exploration of dreams, biblical interpretations, and this idea of a spiritual purge? It's certainly not lighthearted material, but it seems to offer a lot to ponder.
I think that's the key takeaway. It's about pondering Tori's interpretation, while thought-provoking is just one perspective. It's up to each of us to decide what resonates, what challenges our thinking, and what insights we can apply to our own lives.
Perhaps it's a call to examine our priorities. Are we chasing fleeting pleasures like Esau's bowl of soup, or are we investing in something more enduring, something that nourishes our souls?
I love that. It's about asking ourselves those tough questions, evaluating our choices, and maybe even reevaluating our relationship with the divine.
And it's about recognizing that even in a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable, we have the power to cultivate inner peace resilience and a connection to something greater than ourselves.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of symbolism, biblical connections, and thought-provoking interpretations. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that I'm particularly excited to explore, this idea of doors as metaphors.
Yes, we've only scratched the surface of that symbolism.
Okay.
I'm eager to hear how Tori develops this concept and what insights she gleans from it.
Well, let's not keep those doors closed any longer. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into the symbolism of doors, exploring how they represent choices, opportunities, and even our relationship with the divine. Okay, so we've talked about this dream, the symbolism, the biblical connections, the idea of a spiritual purge, but there's one more layer I want to unpack, and it all comes down to doors.
Doors, yeah.
Mhm.
I think we only scratched the surface of that whole symbolism earlier, and I'm really curious to hear how Tori develops this concept.
Well, you know how she rearranged the door after that intense encounter with the intruder?
Mm-hmm.
Made it more secure and harder to break into.
Yeah, she was definitely taking control, learning from the experience, fortifying her defenses.
Right, and Tori suggests this goes beyond just physical security.
Mm-hmm.
It's a metaphor for closing the doors to those negative influences in our lives, setting boundaries,
Right.
being discerning about who and what we allow into our inner world.
I like that. It makes me think about the relationships we choose, the information we consume, even the thoughts we dwell on. Are we letting in things that nourish us, or are we just leaving the door open to negativity?
Such a good point. It's
Mhm.
like we're the gatekeepers of our own,
Yeah.
hearts and minds.
Right.
But she doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
She also talks about how God can open new and better doors for us, especially when we're actively seeking growth and positive change.
I see. So that concept of divine opportunity,
Mhm.
being guided towards a path that's meant for us.
Exactly, like when one door closes, another one opens,
Yeah.
leading us toward, a brighter future.
And to illustrate this idea, she brings in some interesting Bible verses that specifically mention doors.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
For example, there's Revelation 3:8, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a powerful image of possibility, divine favor. It suggests that sometimes opportunities are presented to us that are just too good to pass up.
Right.
And these opportunities might even be divinely ordained.
Like even when we feel lost, there's a guiding hand leading us towards our purpose.
Exactly. And then there's John 10:9, where Jesus says, I'm the gate, whoever enters through me will be saved.
Wow.
This takes the symbolism of doors to a whole other level.
A whole other level.
It makes me think about the choices we make, the paths we choose to follow.
Yeah.
Are we aligning ourselves with the values and teachings of Christ, or are we seeking entry through other doors that might not lead to the same fulfillment?
That's deep. And then there's Isaiah 26:20. Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath has passed by.
So this one has kind of a different tone. It's less about, seeking new opportunities and more about finding refuge,
Right.
about seeking shelter from a storm.
Yeah, like creating a safe space for inner peace and spiritual renewal.
Right. It's like building a spiritual sanctuary,
Yes.
a place where we can connect with our faith and find strength amidst all the chaos in the world.
It all comes back to that question from the dream. Are you afraid? But now that we've explored all this symbolism and the biblical connections, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Definitely. It's not just about fear in the face of danger, but about awareness.
Yeah.
Are we paying attention to the doors that we're opening and closing in our lives? Are we consciously choosing paths that lead to growth and fulfillment and a deeper connection with our faith?
This has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
Exploring Tori's dream interpretation, unpacking the symbolism, the biblical connections. It's really about asking ourselves some tough questions about our own choices and beliefs.
And it's fascinating how dreams can give us insights into our inner world and how these ancient texts, they can provide guidance and meaning in today's world.
And as we wrap up, I think it's important to remember this is just one interpretation. There's so many ways to approach dreams, symbolism, and spirituality.
Exactly. The beauty is that it sparks curiosity, invites different perspectives, and ultimately encourages all of us to find our own meaning and make our own connections.
So to everyone listening, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to explore those hidden depths of your own dreams, to engage with ancient wisdom in a new way, and to be mindful of the doors you're opening and closing in your own lives.
Maybe you'll even revisit some of those biblical passages, see what resonates with you, or even explore other spiritual texts and traditions.
It's a journey of discovery, expanding our awareness, and shaping a life that aligns with our values and aspirations. And who knows, maybe we'll be deep diving into one of your dreams someday.